All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I know that there will be people coming in as we go, but we have a full program tonight, and I want to make sure that we give our presenters ample time to give their talks. My name is Jennifer Weinert. I am a fifth-year Ph.D. candidate in the Endocrinology and Animal Biosciences program here at Rutgers University. My advisor is Dr. Curie Williams. Dr. Williams earned her doctorate degree with an emphasis on equine nutrition and exercise physiology in June 2003 from Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. She holds a master's degree in equine nutrition, also from Virginia Tech, and a bachelor's degree in equine science from Colorado State University. She joined Rutgers University in July 2003 as its equine extension specialist and associate director of outreach for the Equine Science Center, taking an active role in teaching, conducting research, and working with the equine and academic communities to ensure the vitality of the horse industry in New Jersey. So Dr. Williams, take the floor.
Thank you very much, Jen, my lovely host for the evening. I appreciate that tremendously. And while I am not the spotlight at all whatsoever, I am here to get us kicked off and to introduce our wonderful speakers. I'm thrilled that we have such great attendance today. And hopefully you'll join us again on next Monday for nutrition, which is a topic near and dear to my heart. But before we do that, we're going to do one fun thing to get us kicked off. So if everyone would do me a favor, grab your iPhone, your Android phone, or open another window in your browser, or grab an iPad, something else where you can get onto the internet. Because I have just a fun little activity that we're going to do. I really want to find out who's listening tonight and where you're listening from. So I just have a couple of quick questions for you. And we're going to use a website called Menti. So I'd like you to go to menti.com. So everybody can do that. You can do it from your phone. It's super easy if you just go to your Chrome or your Safari, whatever you're on, and type in Menti, MENTI.com. And I just have a few questions for you that you're going to answer, and then I'm going to introduce our first speaker. So I'll give everybody a chance to do that. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to pull up a little presentation. So once everybody's in Menti, you're going to go to this website. And this website will have a code at the top. And the code at the top, and actually if Jen or Kyle will type that code into the chat, since I'm not able to see it right now, you can go ahead, enter that code, and then tell me, and I see them coming in already, where you're listening from. And please do me a favor and type out the whole name, because I wanna get everybody to fill this out very similarly. So if you're in New Jersey, type out New Jersey. If you're in Maryland, type in Maryland. And what's going on here is we're getting a little word cloud, and the bigger the word, the more people that are from that state or country. And I want to see how many countries we have this time, because last Monday we had Australia, Brazil, Peru. I think we had a few others. I can't remember all of them. We had a couple Canadians. So we had some from all over, and I just love seeing how this word cloud changes as everybody gets logged in. So we've got 107 people now that just logged in and are creating this word cloud. I even see a little Canadian flag. Go Canada. But so far, New Jersey is coming through as the biggest word, which means the most people are actually typing that in as where they're from. But I see Minnesota and Pennsylvania are falling close behind, and close behind them are North Carolina and Kentucky. But let me see, where are some other fun ones that I see? Well, we got 124 people logged on. I see British Columbia, and everything's hard when it moves and changes. I see Peru again. Welcome, Peru. I thought I saw Brazil in there. Yep, there's Brazil. Hawaii. Wow, you're listening awfully early on, aren't you? Thank you. Australia. Yeah, excellent. So I still see New Jersey as number 1, Minnesota, Pennsylvania 2 and 3. Kentucky is up there with North Carolina as number 4 and 5. And then we've got quite a few other states. And I just love to see how this keeps changing and changing and changing. I'm also trying to look for some other other countries. If you're in another country, you can continue to add that. Even Alaska, excellent. Welcome to Alaska. How fun. So I always just love doing these, and just to see how everything changes and evolves. So I won't spend too much time. I could leave it here and watch it go all night, but I won't do that. I'm going to move on to the next question. So the next question refers to your primary interaction with horses. So are you just, not just, but are you a horse owner? And you can click just one. I want your primary interaction, your primary responsibility, lessons or training, a barn manager, veterinarian, other industry professional, which I meant feed industry, tack, pharmaceutical, etc. Are you a horse enthusiast? You might not own a horse, but you still love them, or other. And I know there's a bunch of different things. And actually, do me a favor, type to us in the chat and let us know what else you are. I have a picture of a farrier here, but it could be, you name it, part of therapy, working with horses and doing therapy horses, or what did we have? We also had actual physical therapy and physical therapists. We had lawyers, and we had a lot of different things. So go ahead and type me in your chat what other you are if you're responding to other. We have 118 people now, and it looks like the majority of you are horse owners, with a couple of everything else. We've got the whole representation here, a lot of enthusiasts, even a few more veterinarians logging on this Monday. So that's excellent. Well, welcome again, everybody. Looks like we're getting a little bit stagnant around 127 attendees, but I really appreciate you taking the time to fill out our poll. It's always nice to know our audience, where they're from, and who all of our listeners are. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing then. And when I stop sharing, Dr. Malone can start to share her slides while I go ahead and give her and Ellen Rankins' bio. And I will welcome them. So we have Dr. Sara Malone. She graduated from Michigan State University with her bachelor's, and at Rutgers with her master's degree. She then completed her Ph.D. in veterinary science at the University of Melbourne in Australia. So she's got some fellow Australians online tonight. She's been teaching at Rutgers since January of 2019. Prior to returning to Rutgers, she was equine program coordinator and assistant professor at Morehead State University in Eastern Kentucky. And she currently now teaches a class on animal behavior and welfare, which is why I asked her to give her talk for us today. She is going to be followed, and they're kind of doing a team presentation by Ellen Rankins. She's a PhD candidate with Dr. Malinowski and Dr. McKeever at Rutgers. She got her bachelor's from Auburn University and her master's from the University of Florida. And she's working on stress and behavior of therapy horses and working with veterans with PTSD. So I'm going to mute and quiet myself, and I'm turning it over to Dr. Malone. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Dr. Williams. So oh, she disappeared. So I assume that she can hear me okay and everything's going all right. So this is, part of a bigger class that I teach, and really arguably should be multiple classes. So I'm going to try to get through some topics today that I hope will just get you thinking. You're obviously here because you love horses and you're interested in their welfare. So I think that a lot of those stopping points are kind of out of the way already. Okay, so it's just a quick review of what we're up to today. And so I also had a similar type of activity, so we'll launch it in a second. I noticed that 68 of you were horse owners, and that number kept climbing as Dr. Williams' poll went. So I'm going to try to launch a poll. Allow panelists to vote, I guess, if you want to. Okay, so this time it should just pop up onto your screen and you should be able to select one of those options. Yep, and it's working. So I always worry nothing happens right away and I think, oh, it's busted. So go ahead and read through them and just pick one. I think it's limited to one that best describes your role in the horse industry. And you can scroll, there's a little bar at the side, you can scroll down. Okay, and I'm not going to let it run too long because we do have a lot to get through, but okay, and so as it's going, I see 54 of you that are horse owners, 26 of you that own a horse that you use in competition, as opposed to maybe just having a pet horse or a trail riding horse. 8 of you that are horse professionals, such as a horse trainer. 7 of you that run a horse facility. And I noticed 8 of you on Dr. Williams' poll that managed a barn, so that lines up. Several of you that are employed in other areas, professionals in the horse industry. 1 that owns a rescue, several that are involved but do not own horses, some that would like to be involved, a couple students, so welcome to the students, and luckily none of you that don't know why you're here. So it's good, everybody's in the right place, right? So my point, I think, is that equine welfare is a relevant topic for everybody, and we're gonna kind of talk about what equine welfare looks like. Maybe we are. Okay, so your personal opinion, like what you think about animal welfare, is based on a lot of things. Everything from your personal experience, your culture, your religion. There are very large differences even within a family. I used to have my students poll people that they knew. So they asked a classmate, they asked an older family member, like their grandparents, and the differences in what they thought about animal welfare were very widespread. So I think that, you know, looking at these pictures, you can see that we have animals in very different scenarios. The middle one I actually think is a feral dog, but due to its size, I find that hard to believe. So, and their welfare may or may not be impacted negatively in a variety of different ways. And so we're going to talk about what that might look like for horses, particularly in the United States. And, you know, if we had more time, I would get into kind of this cost benefit analysis. You know, obviously the image on the left is a horse or a mule in this case that is needed to do work, right? And so for most of us, we're horse owners. And most of us do not rely on our horses to get a job done for us, like we might if we lived in a different country. And so it just all factors into what you think about animal welfare. And I'm going to ask you your opinion in a couple slides here. Okay, and so when I did these interview questions, these are some of the responses that I received. What does animal welfare mean to you? What does that term, animal welfare, mean? The first, that an animal has the right to be happy, to have a home, to be prosperous. And, you know, we as horse owners might kind of chuckle at this. I was waiting for the animal to have the right to bear arms, right? It sounds a little bit like our amendment rights. But, you know, there's a lot of people that feel this way. I just polled my class of animal welfare students, and they were very much on this side of the scale. That the animal has the same basic rights as humans. So again, similar kind of side of the scale of animal welfare versus animal rights. That I have a responsibility to keep the animals healthy and to look after their well-being. So now we've kind of changed gears and we have a very different type of answer. Finally, that I have the right to own an animal. And we're not going to get too much into that today, but the fact that we own our animals does have some very important legal considerations. I used to have a lawyer come and talk to my class, and he said, if you remembered nothing else, remember that you own your horse, right? And that allows you to make decisions like when to euthanize your horse and things like that. So the second one from the bottom, that I have the responsibility to keep the animal healthy and to look out for their well-being. Does anybody want to guess who gave that type of an answer? This person obviously has been asked this animal welfare question before, right? And I'm not sure. I think you can type in the chat. So does anybody want to guess what kind of person might have written a response like that? A veterinarian, sure, maybe. A parent, perhaps. Vet. Okay, so we've got a few kind of vet themes here. I can tell you, a rescue maybe. That particular response came from the manager of a big dairy farm. And so dairy cattle have been under a lot of scrutiny in terms of their welfare. And so people that work with them on a daily basis are both very concerned about their welfare and also quite educated in how to answer that type of question. And so I think that shows that you can get better at answering that question. And if you hear background noise, we have parakeets that are actually very far away, but I'm sorry, I'm sure you can hear them. Okay, so this is going to be a poll that you're going to do. And again, you're just going to pick one answer and you'll fall somewhere on this scale. So the poll results are anonymous. It doesn't matter to me or what you select. So I'll launch it and then you should be able to read along. I think I also put the full description in the poll. Okay, so what is your personal opinion regarding animal welfare? And again, just, make sure you read the options, pick a choice that works well for you and how you personally feel about animal welfare. And the results are anonymous. So this is important for my students that I tell them that the results are anonymous so that they feel kind of safe in their opinion, right? And I'll give you a while to keep voting. What I often do after this is I ask them what they think their grandparents would say. So if you asked your grandfather, what do you think your grandfather would say? So my grandfather was a crop farmer in Michigan who grew up on a dairy farm. And so I can tell you that his response is very different than my response. It's very different than my nephew's response, who's only 15 and is a vegetarian, right? So we have, even within a family, very big differences in how we feel about this topic. And it's a very emotive topic. That's why I'm careful to tell my students that it's anonymous so I don't have fights and things in class. Okay, so I'm going to end polling. It looks like the majority of you were B and C, with a few of you, I think I can share my results. Okay, a few of you falling a little bit farther down the scale, no one picking the very bottom option, and 29 of you picking the very top option. And so we're going to talk about kind of what these different options mean. Close that. And so the top end of that scale, what often falls into that category are animal rights activists or advocates. And they will often argue for animals to have equal or comparable rights to humans. They're generally very vocal on the use or not using animals for research or for food. And in the most extreme view, such as that expressed by PETA, they would view that animals should not be kept at all, not as pets, not as riding horses, not at all. Okay, the opposite of that, kind of the bottom part of that scale, I think I named it E maybe, is a very utilitarian point of view. So that's an ethical and philosophical theory that states that the best action is the one that maximizes utility, which is defined as that which produces the greatest well-being for the greatest number of people, and in some cases, sentient animals. Okay. And so people who have this viewpoint might argue that the use of animals for research is okay if it cures cancer, or it even cures cancer in animals, for example. So, and again, just out of interest, I told you that my grandfather would have had a much more utilitarian view than I have, and that my nephew has a much more animal rights view than I have. Again, each individual's opinion is based on many factors: culture, ethics, family, past experiences. What it's generally not based on is scientific fact. So regardless of your view of horses, all horses have the same basic needs, right? So if we define those needs, we can evaluate their welfare. It doesn't matter if it's a pet horse that you enjoy having in your yard and you dote on. It's a racehorse that's doing work. It's a working animal like the mule we saw in the picture a few slides back, or even a food animal. In many countries, horses are still used as food animals. But it doesn't matter. That food animal horse has exactly the same requirements as an $80,000 show jumper who's competing at a very high level. Okay. They're still a horse. They have the same basic requirements. And I see, oh, sorry, I see some things in the chat. They're going pretty fast. So I'm just going to let somebody else tell me if they need me to answer anything there. Okay, so Donald Broom really defined what welfare means. And he was asked to do an analysis of the welfare of animals in the United Kingdom, and that's where we came up with the 5 freedoms. It was in a report that he made for the government in the United Kingdom. It defines animal welfare as the state of an animal in relation to its ability to cope with its environment. And I just gave this talk maybe 2 days ago to my, or 3 days ago to my students. And I told them that, you know, you can look at yourself. So your ability to cope with COVID is maybe totally different than your neighbor's ability to cope with COVID, your significant others, another family member. And that's because we all have a lot of different things going on, right? I consider myself very fortunate. You know, my life has not changed that much as a result of COVID. And yeah, I have friends whose situation is completely different. And so our welfare and as it regards to COVID is totally different. So why do we care about horse welfare? I mean, I already said that you're probably here because you're a horse enthusiast, right? You work with horses, you arguably love horses, and you want to do what's best for them. I don't think that that's ever been a question in terms of people who decide to do continuing education. But let's look at that a little bit more directly. What makes you really interested in equine welfare? Okay, so again, we're gonna do a little interaction here. Okay, so why are you concerned about welfare? And I think I did allow you to answer more than once, but don't go too crazy. Just pick something that fits your interest in attending this seminar series. And I will, if I get a question in the chat, I'll try to remember to tell you what the question was. I realize you can't see it. My students can see each other's comments, so I'm not used to that. Okay, so we've got a really wide range, and any of these are absolutely legitimate reasons to be concerned. First, I want to make sure that my personal horse is healthy and happy. When I ask my animal science students this question, it usually focuses on their pet dog, and that's their #1 response. They want to make sure that their dog has good welfare. I work in the field of veterinary medicine, and I want to keep horses healthy. Right? I'm a professional in the horse industry, and I want horses in my care to have good welfare as it reflects on my business. I'm very concerned about the welfare of unwanted horses, including wild horses. I want my horse to perform well, and I believe it will do its best if it has good welfare. I believe that maintaining a high standard of welfare for horses in my care is more economical. And certainly if we were talking about, you know, we go back to that dairy cattleman's answer, you know, I think people often think that farmers who run a farm are not that interested in welfare, that they're more concerned about the bottom dollar. And I don't know if that makes sense, because an animal that's has good welfare is probably going to produce better. It's going to grow faster. And so it's in their best interest to provide them with the things they need to have good welfare. Down to the bottom, I want the horse industry to maintain its social license so that I can enjoy horse events like horse shows, rodeos, etc. And this is interesting, 37 people, which means you've been introduced to this idea of social license before. I participated in a racehorse, what they call it, racehorse summit or something in Lexington a few years ago. And there was a panelist on social license. And, you know, so I explain it to my students that, you know, the circuses really lost their social license and they're gone. Greyhound racing arguably lost its social license and it's gone. And so what we're left with is, you know, horse racing still hanging in there, and other horse events. And many of us enjoy those events. We enjoy going to them, watching them on TV. They also provide maybe a better standard in the horse industry. So for example, I used to live near Lexington. I wouldn't have had the option to take my horse to Haggard's or Reed and Riddle if the racehorse industry didn't exist. Okay. So I don't think we'll have time to get to social license today, but certainly very important in terms of protecting the horse industry. Okay, I think everybody's answered because now it says stop share. Okay. Okay, so we've kind of, I guess, established that we're interested in animal welfare and horse welfare particularly. So how can we evaluate that as it might pertain to our horses or the horses that are in our care? Okay, so originally, I think something that you need to know is that originally people didn't think about animal welfare so much because they didn't recognize horses or any animals as sentient beings. They didn't think that they had feelings or emotions. And that has changed over time. There are still people who don't believe that, but most people believe that animals can feel pain and they can feel fear. And so even if we start with that basis, we have somewhere to go. So in 1823, Bentham wrote, "The question is not, can they reason or can they talk?" So the argument was that they didn't have feelings because they couldn't talk, but can they suffer? And I think if we go back to that picture where there's a cow strapped down to a truck bed and there's a mule pulling a very heavy load, I think we can agree that they can suffer. And suffering might look very different. It might be a horse that's too thin. It might be a horse that's too fat or obese. Okay, I'm trying to keep track of my time so that Ellen has some time. This is problematic when we're discussing things like welfare. And if you've ever tried to have a conversation about welfare with anyone, especially someone who doesn't agree with you, you know it's very subjective and it's very emotional. Okay? So this is problematic because what the animal is feeling is subjective, and meaning that that feeling is only available to the animal as it's experiencing it. So what we really need to know is the animal experiencing something negative? Negative feelings include pain, suffering, distress, fear, hunger, thirst. And I saw that somebody had already commented in the chat that they were concerned about their horse's feelings. Or are they feeling positive things like comfort, pleasure, etc.? And early welfare research really focused on the bad things. And now we're looking at more things like enrichment and providing them with pleasurable activities to do. Okay, we have many ways that we can measure animal welfare, and I'm going to skip through these really quickly so that we have time. A lot of these are going to be kind of self-explanatory to you. We have very direct things like how long are the animals living? And I think for horses, we also need to ask ourselves, how long are they being productive? Meaning if they're a broodmare, how long is their productive life? If they're a competitive horse, how long is their competitive life, their longevity in that career? And that can tell us a lot about their welfare. In other species, we might look at things like how quickly they're gaining weight or how much they're producing. So if an animal is physically healthy and is producing well, does that mean it has good welfare? So let's take cattle, for instance. I drive past a field of cattle. I look out there and there's calves everywhere. They're obviously producing well and those calves seem to be growing well. So let me just ask you a quick yes, no. Okay, so if you find an animal, doesn't matter what kind of animal it is, and they're producing well, so they're producing a lot of milk, eggs, they're growing fast, does that mean that they necessarily have great welfare? So again, you have to just pick one. Okay, so again, I'm not going to let it go too long, but we've got some no's and quite a few maybes and just a handful of yeses. Okay, so perfect example. I used to drive past a field of cattle with a lot of calves, and I always thought, you know, passing by, that their living conditions were appalling. So first of all, it's a good example in the fact that you can't necessarily get the whole story as you're driving past a place, but also that animals will keep producing, sometimes to the detriment of their own welfare, right? Sorry, I penned my dog very far away, but it's barking. You know, we know that a broodmare will hold her foal, for example, even at the risk of her own health. So she'll lose a lot of weight, but she'll keep that foal or nurse that foal, even though it's detrimental to her. Okay, other things to consider: how well are we accommodating their natural behavior? How many of their natural behaviors can they perform? Obviously, these were things that were made to consider zoo animal welfare, right? Is it allowed to perform behaviors that it's strongly motivated to perform? And I have a cribber, we'll talk about cribbing, but he wants to crib, that's what he does. So that he is strongly motivated to perform that behavior. Okay, some common sense needs to be used. You know, we can't let horses free range anymore, etc. Other things that could indicate poor welfare to us: that they have reduced life expectancy, reduced ability to grow or breed, damage. You know, that I have one horse that's getting beat up by my other horses. Hold on 1 minute. Okay, I yelled at her, maybe she'll stop. Things like disease, immunosuppression. So I hear a lot about horses that maybe have rain rot, or horses that have mud fever, whatever you choose to call it, on their legs. Horses that just won't gain weight. And I think that a lot of those probably go down to some type of immunosuppression. So the animal's stressed and its body can't cope. And so we're seeing it in kind of odd ways, like having rain rot, for example. And then, of course, we have coping behaviors, which we're going to talk about. Okay, we already talked about good welfare, meaning that they can show a large repertoire of their normal behaviors. So what would a horse do in the wild? What is his most natural behavior that he would enjoy doing if you were a free-ranging horse? And you, again, you'll have to type it, I think, into the chat. Yep, so we have it right off the bat. They would be grazing, right? So they'd be roaming around and eating grass. That's what they want to do. And I think that next week they'll talk about the importance of fiber as it relates to grazing in a horse's diet. We have other physiological indicators, such as, you know, the fact that a horse's heart rate drops when you scratch its withers, things like that. And I think that we can't really think about welfare without mentioning stereotypes. And so, you know, when I say the word stereotype, what do you think of? And again, you can just type quickly into the chat. And so when it's more fun, I think horse people know the term stereotype. I think it's more fun with particularly young students who will tell me that, you know, all chestnut mares are crazy, or all stallions are violent, or, you know, they'll come up with something that more aligns with what we think of when we think of the word stereotype. Yeah, exactly. All mares are moody there, you know, so it's definitely in there. In this sense, when we're talking about animal welfare, a stereotype is an abnormal repetitive behavior, an ARB. So it's repetitive invariant behavior that has no goal or function. So I told you I have a horse that's a cribber. He doesn't need to crib to survive. He thinks he does, but it has no function. It is not something that he would do in the wild. On the opposite side of that is wood chewing. So a lot of people mistake the behavior of eating wood with cribbing, which I took the video out, but I think horse people are mostly familiar with cribbing. They bite and suck air, so it makes like a burping noise. And we'll talk about why they do that. The two behaviors are very different, and wood chewing is a natural behavior that they would do in the wild, not a stereotype. Okay, so what are some other stereotypes you're familiar with? I've already seen cribbing pop up on there. Any other stereotypes that you are familiar with? Weaving, sure. Just today, one of my behavior students said that she felt very strongly bonded to this horse at the university she used to be at, because every time it saw her, it would dance back and forth. And I said, well, okay, well, we're going to talk about stereotypes later. They're often misdiagnosed, right, as something else. Stall walking, weaving, pawing, etc. Okay. Now, pawing's interesting because pawing can have a natural kind of biological function and not necessarily be a stereotype. Nodding their head, sure. Okay, so what does it mean if your horse does that stereotype? My horse that cribs is named Bernie. Bernie's an off-the-track thoroughbred. And so if I only told you that, I bet you can figure out which category he falls into. So having an abnormal repetitive behavior means one of three things. And I took this, I think, from Temple Grandin's book. She focused a lot in her PhD on stereotypical behavior. So the first thing is that the animal is suffering right now. The second is that the animal was suffering, but now he's doing okay. And the third, I think, is the most interesting. His welfare is not great, but that animal is actually doing better than the animal in the same facility that isn't stereotyping. And the reason is because that animal in the bad environment who's stereotyping is self-soothing or self-stimulating. The non-stereotyping animal may have given up and become totally withdrawn and depressed. And this behavior, this feeling like you have no choice on what's happening in your life that leads animals and people to feel withdrawn, that's linked to clinical depression. So it's an important aspect, I think, of studying animal behavior. I could go on for a whole presentation about, stereotypes in children that were raised in orphanages, for example. Again, Temple Grandin's got some great examples in her book. Okay, and then finally, in the bad environment, the pacing animals just have better welfare. Okay, and they use pacing. It could be any type of stereotype because they are stimulating themselves. So kind of interesting, and maybe not the view that you've traditionally had on stereotypes. I can tell you that I've kept my horses at many barns where people would say, I won't have a cribber in the barn. Okay. So we're gonna maybe look at that kind of myth, I guess. So who do you think has more stereotypes, wild-born or captive animals? And I did not make a poll for this, but that's okay. Okay, so let's make yes that wild-born animals have more stereotypes, and no that captive-bred animals have more stereotypes. And obviously this was kind of a zoo animal question, but. Okay, and I already forgot what I picked. Again, we've got to keep cruising on, so I'm gonna cut you guys off. Okay, you overwhelmingly picked that captive-born animals have more stereotypes. That's actually interesting. That's not, I can tell you what my students would tell me. So, did I write the answer? No. So actually, captive-bred animals, let me think about it, have more stereotypes. Okay? Because the wild-born animal had a very enriching life as he was growing and developing, whereas the captive-born animal may not. And so a lot of it is about this period of development when they're quite young. So knowing that about my thoroughbred, that he was an off-the-track racehorse and that he does have a stereotype now, we can go back and think about where he fits into that category. Is he suffering now or was he suffering sometime in the past? So these are the things that we know contribute to stereotypical behavior in horses. Things like low levels of social interaction, a high degree of stalling, particularly with solid walls in between them, not enough turnout, a very high concentrate, low forage diet. There is some evidence of genetic relationships. There is no evidence that it is a learned behavior. So the people who told me I couldn't board my horse because he would teach the other horses to crib, no. Stressful competitive life may contribute, or stressful weaning. Traditionally to wean a baby horse, you put his mother somewhere and you trekked it away, right? That's how the big thoroughbred farms still do it. That's pretty stressful. So there's a lot of new evidence that just weaning them across the fence or in separate stalls is beneficial. Okay, I see the time is flying by, so we might have to keep going. So the interesting thing about stereotypes is it becomes, I don't want to use the term habit, but they become addicted to that behavior. And so often, even when they're emancipated, I love to ask my students what emancipation means because sometimes they confuse it with the word emaciated, which always makes me giggle a little. So emancipation means we take the horse out of that bad environment. So we can use the term rescue if you want. We rescue him from the environment where he developed that stereotype. But even after we take him away, they're still going to do that stereotype. It's become very rigid, very much a part of their daily activities. It releases endorphins, dopamine and serotonin, which makes them feel calm when they're doing it. And so they're going to keep doing it most likely. especially if they've been doing it for a long time. My horse was a racehorse for 10 years, and so he still cribs. He does crib more when he's upset about something. If I take away one of his buddies, then he'll start cribbing. If I'm late with dinner, he'll start cribbing. Okay, so there are a lot of ways we can evaluate welfare and a lot of reasons you might choose to evaluate welfare. So I think what people think of as being normal is that you've been called to investigate some unwanted horses or some horses that have not been properly cared for. So for most horse professionals, that'll happen at some point in your career. But maybe you should evaluate the welfare of your own horses. I'm constantly doing this with my horses. I had a filly born this year, and I really researched like how I should wean her, what I should do with her. I don't know that it mattered because she jumped the fence like 3 times trying to get back in with her mother. But you know, we tried to do what was best in terms of her welfare. So I'm not going to talk in detail about the 5 freedoms. You probably have heard of them before. They come from that Broom report from the UK, and they are focused on production animals, cows and pigs. But I think they can very easily be applied to horses. And so I'm going to give you a quick example before I let Ellen take over. And we'll see what one of these freedoms might be a problem for this horse. Okay, and so I just stole this picture. I think it was from someone else's welfare book. And this is a horse that's warming up to be shown. Okay. And you can think whatever you want about the picture. You can cringe, you can think it's beautiful. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me if that's an $80,000 horse or something you rescued from a feedlot 6 months ago. His needs, that horse, I think it's a mare actually, are exactly the same. Okay. And so which of the 5 freedoms do you think we have some problems with right now? And again, I can't let you chat too long. Horrible, yes. Okay, there's one thing in particular that you'll notice. What do you think is so horrible? Okay, roll cur. Freedom from pain. Okay, so if you're not in a certain subset of the industry, you may not be familiar with the word roll cur, which really is that this horse is overflexed so that its mouth essentially is touching its chest in this picture. So very extreme. And I don't have time to talk about like, was this one split second and then the horse kind of unfolded itself? We just have this picture, we're gonna go with it. And so putting everything else aside, I mean, obviously this horse is well fed, well cared for. He could be experiencing pain, could maybe not be exhibiting his natural behaviors, could be under stress, okay? So let's look at why I'm worried about roll cur, and I don't have time to get into how they see, but let's just skip ahead. Okay, so I took these from the book I use for animal behavior, which is Paul McGreevy's book. And so this horse here, in order to see at a far distance, he has to elevate his head. Okay, so look what happens when we overbend, essentially what roll cur means. We overbend the horse. Now he can't see in front of him. Okay, so there's a reason that you've never seen a horse approach a jump like this. As they're approaching a jump, their head comes up and forward so they can get a good line of sight at that jump. If I make him approach the jump like this, the chances will crash, I feel, are pretty significant. Here again, I think this is actually the same horse. So the yellow is indicating where that horse's line of vision is. Now, can it roll, strain its eyes to try to see in front of it? Sure. But I also think there's a reason that we have some collisions in warm-up arenas, for example, because this horse really is dependent on the rider to steer it around. Okay, and then, you know, we can go back to this later if we have time and you have questions. Okay, I want to leave Ellen a little bit of time. Sorry, Ellen.
Quite all right. So thank you for a lovely introduction and setup to this talk. So we're going to dive into a very specific example. I'm kind of building off of what Dr. Malone has building off of, and we're going to take a look at how we might assess welfare within a very specific subsample of horses. So you go ahead and go to the next slide. So we're going to be looking at horses in equine assisted services for this activity. And so this term of EAS is now the generally accepted term an umbrella term for horses that are engaged in a variety of activities. So these could be horses that are used in therapeutic or adaptive riding. It could be horses that are used in providing hippotherapy in the setting of physical, occupational, and/or speech therapy or other types of therapies, as well as other types of activities. But these would be kind of some of the primary examples. And so, as Dr. Malone mentioned a little bit ago, there's several different ways we can assess welfare. So we're going to be taking a look kind of at the scientific research literature of how do we approach this from the science standpoint. And so one approach would be to measure physiological variables. She mentioned heart rate earlier. We could also use heart rate variability, which is something we derive from heart rate, or hormones like cortisol. However, today we're going to focus in on behavior as an indicator of welfare in these horses. And again, there's different ways we can consider this, right? We can, earlier, as Dr. Malone mentioned, we can think about what behaviors the horse might naturally express, and do they have the freedom to express those behaviors? Or in some of these studies, we can look at more specific behaviors. So the behaviors listed here on the left side of the slide that you see are a list of very specific behaviors that are commonly used in some of these studies that have assessed welfare of horses in these types of programs. And these would all be behaviors that the more frequently or the more often we see these behaviors in a particular horse or a horse within a specific context, we would say the horse is more stressed. So again, these would be indicators of a more negative affective state in these horses. And you can read that list there. And so when we do a study like this, we would take the behavior and it would be given a description. So for an example, most of you are probably familiar with something like pinned ears, in which the horse has pressed its ears caudally against its head and or neck. And so again, we can just count these behaviors. The other option in a lot of these studies is to kind of take a look at a whole repertoire of behaviors that the horse might perform, and then combine kind of this overall expression of a lot of different behaviors into a behavioral score, with one end of the scoring system indicating a more stressed or negative affective state, and the other end indicating a more positive affective state. So when we actually look at studies that have used either one of these techniques to actually assess horses in EAS, we see kind of mixed results. So we have seen in some studies like that by Kaiser and colleagues that stress-related behaviors do increase under certain circumstances. So in this particular study, it was when those horses were working with a specific subset of participants within the program. Other studies have found no changes in behavior. And then interesting, there was even a study by Johnson and colleagues that found that horses that were being ridden by veterans, so in an adaptive riding program, had lower behavior scores, so indicative of a more positive affective state than when they were ridden by more experienced riders. But keep in mind, right, we're asking the horse to do very different things in these two scenarios. So these are all things we have to consider when we look at a specific instance of a horse's welfare, of what is that horse being asked to perform, and how does that fit into its larger lifestyle also. So those studies, when we look at specific scenarios, we kind of see mixed results. But in broader terms, we do tend to see from a number of different survey type of studies that there is a high rate of behavioral problems in horses engaged in these types of activities, enough sometimes that they actually have to be let go from these programs. And so I think this means at a program level, and so I would encourage all of you, even if this is not your field, this is applicable across kind of the entire equine industry, that really we do need to be taking the time to constantly monitor our horse's welfare and track it over time. So how might that horse's behavior change, and what might those trends mean for your horse's well-being or welfare in total? So I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Malone.
Thank you very much, Ellen. So Ellen is actually doing this research right now. She's a graduate student at Rutgers, as Dr. Williams mentioned. And her interest particularly is in horses that are used for these equine assisted services. So I don't know Ellen's current status. I don't know if she needs volunteers or maybe you're just interested in finding out the results of her work, but that's certainly something you can ask her, I think, at the end.
Yes, absolutely. I would be happy to entertain questions on that subject.
So I just want to end with this. So this is, you know, Ellen encouraged you to kind of rethink what you're doing with your own animals. And I told you that I do this constantly with my horses. You know, just today, it's really cold here. And I was thinking, do they have enough hay? Like, you know, it took them 4 or 5 hours to eat their hay. Maybe that's not enough hay and I should go give them more. I think that we become complicit sometimes in that this is the way it's always been done with horses. And we're going to keep doing it that way. It's worked for us for 100 years. It might work and the horses are coping and they're doing okay, but it's not necessarily the best thing. Perfect example, you know, you're building a new barn. How do you design your stalls? If you look at barns from 50 years ago, they almost always have solid dividers between the stalls. Is that necessary? So this is some research from a group, and I don't remember the name of the person who presented it, but they're doing work with the Swiss National Stud. And I just want us to kind of rethink our management techniques. So it's pretty loud music. Let me see if I've got it turned down. So these are all stallions. These are breeding stallions. At the end of breeding season, they turn them out. Oh, sorry, I accidentally stopped it. I don't know what's happening. So I'm just going to pause it there for a minute. I don't know how many people in the audience have or manage stallions, but you probably were like, oh my gosh, this is horrific, right? This is something that doesn't usually happen here. I have owned stallions and I have had them living with other horses, and I think that probably is very good for them. But these are horses that, you know, grew up that way, then were separated in a more traditional management style and are brought back together. And there's a few things I want you to notice. They're very vocal, they're very loud, but so far I don't see anybody who's been injured, right? And let me fast forward. Again, you can find this on YouTube if you're interested. So here they are after some time, still very excitable. This is why a lot of people don't keep them, right? They're very noisy. And they decided to race it out. Okay. And then if I go forward, here's after 30 minutes. So there's still a lot of mouthing, a lot of kind of posturing. But again, no one's died yet. Okay, and if I further scoot us forward, after 1 day, I appreciate that they changed the music as well. You still see some that the chestnut here is pretty mouthy. Okay, and so, I mean, do I think this is going to happen on a big thoroughbred farm in Kentucky? You know, I have shown this video to many people who work and manage those types of farms. Probably not going to happen. But it, I think, sheds light on the fact that maybe we could adjust some of our management techniques for what might be better for the horse. They also have stalls for these horses where they can reach fully through and touch each other, even though they're stallions. So, you know, there's some kind of interesting management considerations. So remember, again, one image or one video does not tell the whole story. We often get people who want to know why the horses are blindfolded on campus. And of course, this picture on the right, I always show it. I hope it's a joke. I don't know. You know, stop killing alligators for Gatorade. So it just shows that a lot of times people who are protesting maybe don't have the whole story. We can never make their welfare adjustment totally objective, even though we want to, you know, as good scientists, remove emotion from it. It involves a mixture of scientific knowledge, but also value judgments. You know, do you value this life over that life, and etc. The measures are objective, but weighing them into your assessment involves ethical values. Okay, so Dr. Williams had mentioned there were some questions in the Q&A. I don't know how much time we have. I don't want to cut into Angelo's time, but I'm happy to answer what I can, or I can alternatively continue typing to you once Angelo takes over.
Yeah, so Sarah, I think what we're going to do is we're going to move into the next presentation. If you would, while we are starting Angelo's presentation, you can go into the Q&A and you can type in some answers that are directly for your questions, or we can wait until the end. So I will let you decide that, but I think we're going to move right into Dr. Telatin. So if you want to join us, go ahead and stop sharing your screen, Sarah, and I will introduce Dr. Telatin, and he can go ahead and get his screen shared and get set up and ready to go. So it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Angelo Telatin. He is a British Horse Society Fellow and Associate Professor of Equine Science at Delaware Valley University, and a board member at the International Society of Equitation Science. Angelo specializes in the application of learning psychology to horse training, the application of learning psychology to horse training, and has earned his Ph.D. in equine behavior from Pisa University. In addition to his academic achievements, Angelo is an accomplished rider in both show jumping and dressage, earning many championships himself, and now coaches riders at all levels. Recently, Angelo is best known for his bridleless riding at horse shows and events, which I believe you can see right here in his video, which I will spotlight for everyone. So thank you, Angelo, for joining us. I am going to let you take over.
Okay. Where is it? Here. I'm going to do something a little bit out of the ordinary. I'm going to show you a video at the beginning without making too many comments that will open up some questions, and then I'll go into the psychology of learning. I think if we see some video first, it gets a little bit less stressful and less this is my bedtime, so it wakes up a little bit people, and then maybe on the chat later, if you want to type a specific topic that you want me to steer the conversation. Normally, I do better in as a dialogue presentation. Due to the fact that we are too many, we can't do it. But I think I can do something with the chat. So here we see an animal that is a horse that is quote aggressive, and the more we're trying to launch him, and the more he shows aggression. I'm gonna skip this part. Oops. I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back later. Yeah. Then same thing here with the girl. He shows a little bit more aggression. Okay, we stop here for a second, and then we're gonna see this video again at the end. Stop it. Okay, I do that all the time. Don't worry. There. Question. Okay. And then I'm going to show another video again, and then I'll start talking.
With the help of the psychology of learning, we will try to understand why sometimes horses emit defensive behavior. Someone may think that the horse is showing anger towards the whip or try to assert leadership over the rider. As consequence, most of the time the rider increases the pressure of the whip, trying to regain submissions or leadership. In reality, the sequence is pressure, behavior, release of the pressure. And, as we know from the psychology of learning, this is how we teach horses to reproduce a behavior. Remember, horses repeat all the time the last behavior they were doing before the pressure stopped. Like in this case, the buck has stopped the pressure of the whip. Therefore, every time that we're going to use the whip, Grissino is thinking that the behavior that we are asking is actually the buck. Before starting.
Okay, now I'm talking because, okay, so before starting the behavior modification, I want to make sure that the horse knows what the whip means. You will be surprised when you tap a horse with the whip, how the horse don't do anything. Now, the whip, it doesn't show that much, so I'm going to make a sound. So basically, as you can see, the whip was keep tapping while the horse was kicking. Again, kick, and then the whip release when the horse moves forward. Again, I want the trot. So the horse is going to kick, and trot is not there, so he's going to try another one. He's going to buck. But this time, my whip stays there, and it keeps tapping. Now the horse is like, okay, that wasn't the answer. That wasn't the answer. Try to trot, and I release the pressure. Okay, this was a horse that was actually kicking a lot the way. And now you can see I tap again, and the horse gives me the answer moving forward at the trot. Okay, and then again, it goes faster and faster and faster. And then I do the same thing at the canter, and the horse responds very fast. So now that I've done the fun part, I want to show you real quick, so I get your attention. This is what is behind everything, okay? There's no time today. I have a whole semester to go through these things. And when I do clinic, I go around the world. I go through in detail this one. I want to just give you a little bit of taste on what is behind, okay? So this is what is behind all the behavior modification that we are going to talk. Learning is divided in 3 groups. We have non-associative that is also divided, and we have associative, we have cognitive. So I won't go through all of this because it's difficult and it's very, but just to let you know that behind what we do normally every day, there is a lot of science going on. Another things that I want to share with you is this one. Okay, it's operant conditioning, and it's the difference reinforcement. Once we have a clear example of the different reinforcement, then we know, I call it the glasses of operant conditioning. And when we watch a problem, when we watch a training, when we watch something with the horses, if we put on the glasses of operant conditioning, we can really see what's going on and make a difference between what's happening. Now, let me open the PowerPoint presentation that I thought was open. I can't see your, for some reason, I can't see your chat. And I don't know why I can't see your chat, so I wouldn't have the possibility to chat. There it is. To know what you're asking. Okay, so let's do a big conversation on horse and human and horse relationship, so we understand how we can influence each other. You heard a lot of time that horses are herbivore and we are carnivore, and so we try to, a lot of people, especially in natural horsemanship, try to create this dichotomy to explain why we don't understand each other. Predator and prey is another dichotomy that it explains why we don't understand each other. But is it true? Of course, as you can see, there is a right there. There. And here there is a video which we're going to skip of a horse that is actually attacking a human. So is it really there, the communication and then the interaction between psychology of learning, human and species, or lies something else? Predators. There are different types of predators. There are specific and solitary, which are cat and tiger, and there are non-specific, pack, like dog, lions, and men. Before the rifles, we were non-specific predator. So, as you can see, cat and tiger behave completely different than dog and lion. So when we try to think about horse and human relationship, we always try to compare it with a dog, and we try to recreate that sort of layer that we have with the dog. But dog, like I said, and lion, which are the same family of cat, but behave completely different. It lays on the fact that being non-specific predator, our brain is wired to work as a pack, to work together. So we look for the same thing, and our brain synchronize. So with the dog, we have most likely we have this ability to create connection that we don't have with the horse. And other things that I'll suggest you to just Google it, because we don't have time, is going to be the Beliaya foxes. You go on YouTube and you Google Beliaya foxes, you're going to see that this guy made a selection and selected foxes just with the criterion that they were non-aggressive to human. And in very, very short time, he domesticated a group of foxes. And then they could genetically research on them, and they found that there are actually the gene of domestication. And those gene of domestication, they're kind of similar across the board as far as horses, as far as all the domestic animals. Because now we can see which one they are. With the dog, actually, we found out that there are many more. Dog is the only animal that not only has lost fear of a human and accept interaction, but also responds to emotional interaction with humans. So that's where we have to rely. And then the herbivores. Herbivores also are different. Zebra and donkey, most of them are territorial. Zebra and some donkey are territorial. So they're less fast in learning. They're more aggressive and more stubborn. Why? Because if I'm in the same territory, I don't have to learn anything. I don't have to discover anything. And I rely my survival on being stubborn and being aggressive. If I'm a non-territorial animal, like a horse, for example, I need to be flexible. I need to learn. My brain needs to learn because I need to see new things, adapt, and learn. And then same thing, for example, elephants are very similar to horses because they're also non-territorial. So they have to have an extreme memories, like horses have a huge memory because they have to remember where the source, for example, water holes were 2 or 3 years before in case of a big drought. The togetherness instinct is the most important, more than the leadership instinct. We're going to see on the next slide of that one. And then I'm going to show you the investigative behavior is also very important. Okay, so here is a horse that they made inflate a balloon, and so panic, explode, but the horse, Mother Nature make the horse shift really quickly from fear, and then after the fear, the investigative behavior kicks in right away, and then the ear and the telescopic movement of the neck bring the smell sense first, and then the tactile felt there. So for the about 20 seconds, we went from complete fear to investigative behavior. As you can see, the horse to switch into investigative behavior had to extend his neck out. When we ride horses and we put a bit, we contract the neck on some of the video that Sara shows. So we take away completely the investigative behavior. I have a video, if you are interested, on a horse that is stopping in front of a water jump, how I solved using the psychology of learning. And I can show you that one, where I basically use the investigative behavior as mean to make the horse rethink about the water jump and jump it again. Okay, so again, horsey, one thing that it's creating problem in the horse relationship is that we think that the horses need a leader. A lot of you saw the ramp and join up where we make the horse go around and we become a leader. And the leadership theory has created several problems and is opening the door for violence to horses. I'll show you just this video, just to break down all your belief. Okay, this is a round bend and this is a join up done with a car. Okay, so if we listen to the theory of leadership, oh, the horse does the join up because it's a predator, sorry, it's a prey, it's a herbivore, and need a leader because otherwise it's obsessed, and it need a leader in myself. But in reality, what's happening, it's the horse just follow the operant conditioning of pressure and release of the pressure rules. The horse's main instinct, it's not the one of having a leader, but it's the togetherness. This is the video that Sara shows. So if you remember the video that she just projected, the horses after the first day, they actually no, after 30 minutes, they split themselves in group, in couples, and they start living in couples. Even when they were in the shed, they were in the shed by couples. because that's the most important instinct of the horse, togetherness and find actually a best friend. That's what the horse wants to. Okay, now, the leadership concept opened a lot of kind of worms and open the space for, like I said, violence. Because to be a leader, I need to assert my my leadership. Okay. In reality, where the horse and human relationship lies. The horse and human relationship lies if we understand each other's brain and we understand how we learn. So we can tailor-made every training session so that the horse can understand. Now, as human, we have a frontal cortex very developed and we know about time. And for us, if something, let's say I'm fighting with a horse. For me, if I fight and the horse win 5 minutes, I get very aggressive and I finish the 5 minutes, and for the rest of the hour, the horse works submissive. In my brain, I won the fight. Actually, in the horse's brain, he won the fight. If I set up my training in a different way, and when I start my fight, instead, I apply one pressure and I keep it and I wait it and I make sure that I ask one thing and I wait for the horse to do it. Okay, and then it takes maybe an hour and the horse does it. In our brain, we think, oh, I lost the battle today. The horse resisted for 40 minutes. In the horse's brain, because the horse count behavior, all he remembered the day after is, oh, shoot, I had to listen 100% of the time that he asked me something. So the day after, when I ask the same thing, the time is going to go down to half of the time, half of the half. And then by the end of our training, the horse is going, when we ask the horse to do something, he's going to do it because he's all going to know is, oh, shoot, I have to listen 100% of the time that he asked me. So when we go to a horse show and the horse sees something new and we give him a request, the first horse that fought for 5 times and gave up the 6th time, in front of a problem is going to remember, oh, wait, I don't have to listen because last time I won 5 times and I gave up 1 time. And so during our competition, he pull up that trick and then we can't do anything. The second horse, even though we spend a lot of time at the beginning, is going to just say, oh, shoot, I need to listen to 100% of the time. Okay, so our communication goes for visual, verbal, and tactile. Visual, remember, it's mostly from the ground. I always say, do not overdo. You need to know what you're doing. If you work from the ground, that does not transfer most of the time under saddle, because under saddle we use tactile communication. So we need to develop like a braille communication where alphabet and not a visual like alphabet like for deaf people. But be assured that the horse look at you and know exactly what you are doing, because our posture send messages to the horses. Okay, where do we normally use our visual communication? We normally use it in the round pen. That's where we can, the horse sees us and we can send messages visually and start a communication. This is to show you that Clever Hans, it's a horse that knew how to count, and it basically learned how to count by following the eyebrow of the presenter that was able to just, if you see those many faces, those are facial expressions that are connected to emotion. We cannot control those facial expressions. There is a nice video on YouTube on TED Talk of a FBI agent that talks about how they use this facial expression to find out killers during interviews. So that's basically, that's what the horses was basing for communication. So sometimes we're mad with our spouse or with our children or with something with our employer, and then we walk into a barn and our face has certain facial expression. The horse reads it and suddenly behave that we don't understand why. Well, 90%, if you have an angry facial expression, every other person that walk towards him angry towards the horse is going to hit him. So in his brain, statistically, he's more likely to be hit when you get that face. And maybe he behaved defensively just because of that one. So we need to be aware of that one. Okay, now we talk about the most important thing, which is the tactile communication. Tactile communication, the pressure that we use with horses, for the horses has no attached meaning. Okay, here's a horse. We taught him to do the Spanish walk. So we tap the front leg and he does. He was kicking with the hind leg, the students, when they were trying to polar up. So I thought, well, I do a reverse cue. I tap the hind leg and I teach him to keep the feet down. Instead, look where he comes up. He's like, wait, he's tapping me. I guess I need to do something. And then pressure, do something. Behavior, release of the pressure. So he's going to repeat, there you go, see how fast he is? He's going to repeat whatever behavior he was doing right before the pressure stopped. So pressure means no, do something, and release of the pressure means yes. Now, where is the problem when we ride the horses? When we ride the horses, and we take contact with the rein and we put the leg, our pressure is always intermittent. It's yes, no, because we take it and we release it. We take it and we release it. We take it and we release it. Every time we take it, we say no, do something. Every time we release, it means yes, that was good. If you think now back to the other horse that I showed you at the beginning to launch, every time that I was whipping the whip, he would attack me or the girl, and we had to back off. So pressure, do something, behavior, attack, release of the pressure as stepping backward. I'm gonna re-show you at the end how we fixed it. As far as welfare, I wanna make sure that everybody knows that using pressure with the horses, it's not creating too much problem as anxiety or lowering the welfare. They've done a rat experiment where they take 3 cages. 1 cage had no electricity. The rat was put in that cage and he was fine, a little bit anxious because he wasn't on his normal place, but fine. Then the other 2 cages, there was electricity that was electrocuting the base of the feet. 1 cage had a light that was turning on and they would say the electricity is coming, and there was a lever that the rat would press to stop the electricity. When the rat was stopping the electricity, both cages would stop the electricity. Now, we would think, well, the 2 horses, the 2 rats that experience electricity probably as kind of stressed at the same level because they got electrocuted for the same amount of time, while the rat that didn't have electricity was fine. In reality, the rat that could predict light turns on and control, stop the electricity, had the same stress parameter of the rat with no electricity. And the other rat instead was completely insane, stressed, and anxious. So what that does mean? That does mean that when we use, so our aids is the predictability. We use an aids and we say, we want to turn left, opening our rein, or gentle pressure means forward, or all of our aids means do something. If we are consistent, the horse knows that it produces a specific behavior, and if we produce that specific behavior, the pressure goes away. So the horse is fine. Is when we are intermittent that we keep confusing the horse, and the horse have no idea what to do. Yes, that was the same. How do I go forward? Oh, wait, I was clicking the wrong. Okay, now here's a graph. So pressure means, so we can talk with the horse, and our communication goes through the binary language. Pressure, no. Release of the pressure mean yes. It seems easy. It seems super fine. Now, if you look on the left, this is look not the point, but just the horizontal, the top. Okay, this is the pressure that is measured from the rein to the mouth of the horse. So this is neutral. Then we apply the pressure went up, more pressure, more pressure. We hold the pressure until the horse emit the behavior coming round on the bit. As soon as the horse came on the bit, we released the pressure and we said, yes, good boy, you're on the bit. So the horse goes on the bit or stop, for example, because we release the pressure, not because we pull the horse on the bit or we pull the horse to stop. We actually release the horse to stop. This is when I've done this experiment, I'm like, okay, that's everything is fine. Well, it's not. I did the test on probably 90%, 90 students. This is what it looks their graph. When I was asking apply pressure and hold the pressure, this is what was their graph: pressure release, pressure release, pressure release, pressure release. And I was asking them, are you holding the pressure? Yeah. I'm holding the pressure steady. Okay. This is show you how the horse is completely confused on what is going on. Now, another concept with the binary language, and also the speed in which a horse learns. Okay, so here we're tapping, and we want the horse to move towards the whip. The horse has no idea what it's supposed to do. So it's gonna try behavior. He tried the kick, he tries multiple behavior, and the tap is always there. And then at one point, it will move sideways there, and then we release the pressure. Look how fast the horse is already learning. Oh, that's what you want to. Okay, I got it. And then it knows, there you go, and knows that he can control the behavior. Oops, I don't want you there. Now look what happened. 90% of the time that we use our pressure, it's never below a second. When we use the whip, when we put the spur, when we hold the rein, we're never constant. We're always making mistakes. Look what happened. Above a second, the horse has no idea what to do, and he's trying random behavior like the first horse, only that this time the random behavior, meaning I tap and I stop, I tap and I stop, I tap and I stop. He comes out with the rear, and then he thinks that the rear is actually what he's supposed to do. Now let's watch this video again with the knowledge that we had so far. So again, look, what pressure? I'm trying to use the base of the whip, but every time that I apply pressure with the whip, it bends. He comes towards me, the lunge whip bend, and I have to step backward. Watch my path. I keep stepping backward. So I'm releasing pressure to that behavior. In the horse language, this means, good boy, keep attacking me. That is actually what I want to. Then I change. I use a very expensive tool, which is a bamboo stick that I picked from the yard. So don't buy the carrot stick. It doesn't work in that way. So with the bamboo stick, I can actually hold the pressure and position myself. I need to first position myself properly. I didn't want to cut, because then you would say, oh yeah, you fix the horse and then you cut. There you go. Now I'm in position. He's gonna try to come towards me, but the pressure will never release. And then he's like, okay, biting doesn't work, attacking doesn't work. Oops. What happened? I have it here. Where is it?
Angelo, I think you just went past it. It was up near the top on the left-hand side.
Yeah, there it is.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so I had the bamboo stick. Look what happened as soon as the horse understand there that he tried the behavior, the pressure never released. So he's like, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. Oh, let me try to move forward. He moves forward, I release the pressure, and he's like, oh, that's what you want to. And then he goes right into that behavior. Okay, I'll fast forward a little bit. Then I put the girl right after. This is right after. I put a girl, and the girl is like, same thing. You start with the whip, and he's like, oh, this is the other game. This is the game where you put pressure, I attack you, and you back off. The scientific term is operant conditioning, negative reinforcement based, where the horse is repeating the behavior that releases the pressure. So I gave her the whip. It takes her a little longer because she's not experienced, but then finally she's positioning herself properly. She holds the whip, and boom, magically he's like, oh, okay, you want me to go forward. Here she's still backing off with her leg, but I'll there you go. Now he's like, oh, okay, you want me to go forward. There. Now, this is funny. Right after I did it again. So I take him again. You think by now he understands. No, every time that I use the whip, he's gonna do this one. And he's gonna attack actually a lot. Okay, I'm doing it on purpose to show that it seems that he's like, okay. And then we switch and I go to the bamboo stick and he's like, oh, this is the other game. And without even trying this time, when he sees the bamboo stick, he's like, oh, this is the other game. Imagine when you are riding under saddle, the horse that backs when you put the leg, the horse that runs into a fence, etc. There, and then I have the bamboo stick, and now he's like, oh, this is the other game. Okay, so now I'm showing you, there you go, and it's just going fine and relaxed. Okay, now I'm showing you 2 more videos because I'm afraid that I'm going without time. And then we use the question and answer at the end to discuss instead of talking right now. Okay, this I call it the paradox. When we ride a horse, there, and this is where I go with the negative reinforcement. Okay, this is typical. When we ride a horse and the horse tosses his head in front of the fence, okay, why is this happening? Very simple. Because when we are jumping, after the horse has tossed his head, we release the rein to jump. Otherwise, we crash. But for the horse, instead is, oh, I was tossing, and he releases the rein because I was tossing. So the next time that he pulls the rein in front of the jump, I need to toss more because that's what he does if I want to release the rein. And that's what exactly is happening. So what do? We need to create a scenario where we put something in between our jump and the horse. So up to the pole, I'm in charge of my flat work. If the horse tosses the head, I make a circle and I do not release the rein, which means no, you're not allowed. And then before I get to the fence, as soon as I hit my first trot pole, I release completely the contact. So the horse has no chance to toss its head in front of the fence because he's free now. The trot pole are gonna keep the horse steady, so then the horse is not gonna run into the fence and he's gonna do a proper jump. Once I have achieved this one at the trot, so here, for example, I have a toss, I make a circle. I don't, I start approaching. Then I transfer these skills at the canter and I do it over a canter pole. Same thing. Before the canter pole, let's move up. Before the canter pole, if the horse tosses, I make a circle. If the horse doesn't toss and I jump the pole, I soften my hands there and I keep going. So then I see here, I hold my contact, and if only when the horse comes around and wait, there, then I approach. Now, paw neutral. My hands are there and I don't do anything. And that way I teach my horse not to toss in front of the hands, because the sequence pressure and release of the pressure is maintained. At that point, I can do it easily outside without a fence, without the pole. And I'll just show you a nice big jump, bigger jump. Okay. There. Again, all on this same token, I'll show you the injection. This is typical. Okay, this is a horse that is, when I went there, it's like there is no way that, and not even the vet comes in. Okay, same thing. I'm holding the contact. Pressure stays to the wrong behavior. Release of the pressure to the still behavior. Pressure stays to the rear, goes away. Pressure stays to the rear, it goes away to the still behavior. Look how much this horse is gonna take to the horse to learn. That is the still behavior that is rewarding. And then once I start doing the injection, it's gonna still. There. This is called extinction burst, by the way. The horse is trying to escalate the behavior that knows before they can't change behavior. They escalate the behavior that they knew that was releasing the pressure. Once they exhaust all those tentative, when they do the burst, you're gonna see she's gonna magically stop and then accept the injection. The syringe there. The syringe has a needle. Sorry, has a nail inside, because I found out that I can desensitize to the site and the pressure of the hand, but I can't, but then when I poke with the needle, the horse is gonna react. Instead, with the nail, the sensation on the skin is identical of the needle there. And this is done in what, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes and a half. Then I add food. As not as a positive reinforcement, but as a counter condition. Okay, so again, behind all of these things, there is a psychology of learning, and there is operant conditioning. If we master operant conditioning well, okay, and now what I do, I make it longer. I make the pressure stays there longer. And see, if you watch her, she freezes when I put the needle, because she's actually thinking that she's stopping me. She's making the syringe go away by standing still. I think I don't have that much time left. Shaping.
Angelo, I was just going to jump in and say, I think that might be a good place to stop. We have about 20 minutes left for questions, and I know we've had a lot come in. So I would just invite the other speakers to go ahead and turn on your cameras. I'm going to go ahead and pin you all to the screen, and then Jen and I are going to jump in and start asking you guys some of the questions that we saw.
Okay. Yeah, I knew it. I was going to say about my positioning in the stall while I was doing the syringe injection, and that Sue was asking.
Oh, yes. You can go ahead, and you want to address that, and then
yes. So the horse was not tied up. It was free in the stall, but I was positioning myself in that. I have another video. If you go on my YouTube channel, there is a video of a horse that's usually what they do. They slam you into the wall, and I'm purposely positioning at the height of the shoulder. And when they back off or they rear, I move myself and I use the lunge line to keep them straight. So they're free to do any behavior if they want to. It's just a way for me to keep myself safe. And when they try to smash me into the wall, I step into the door. That's why, if you notice, I was close to the door. So I do not release the syringe, but I let them, and the horse learned that behavior doesn't give anything. And without a minute, I have also on the YouTube channel, if you go, there is a fly spray. Fly spray takes 30 seconds to fix that behavior. So yes, you're right. Like I stay in that position. But before doing this thing, make sure that you know what you're doing, because the extinction burst, during the extinction burst, the horse exaggerate the behavior that new was giving him away. So if you don't know how to face the extinction burst, you're actually teaching the horse, because you release the pressure in that moment, you're teaching a horse doing a bad behavior. Now, if you Google Parelli abuse, you're gonna see actually Parelli trying to do this behavior modification, missing the time during a demo in England, and actually creating an explosion and an escalation to the horse, exactly trying to do the same behavior.
Got it.
I would just mention Angelo also has an excellent video on clipping. So I don't know about the rest of you, but how many times have we tried to clip a horse that is smashing us all over the place? And maybe we should have taken, I don't know, what did it take you with the big gray horse? 20 minutes to fix the problem? So that's something worth checking out on his YouTube page.
Can one of you guys please share his YouTube channel in the chat while we're starting to ask questions? That would be great, because I'm sure others would want to watch some videos.
It's super easy. If you go on YouTube and you just put my name, Angelo Telatin, it'll pop up.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Well, one of the questions that I know I have been wondering about, and I see some people in chat asking, and I saw some people on the Q&A ask, why did that horse eat that little chick? Was it craving meat? Is that a prey predator? What was the behavior behind the fact that that horse ate that poor little chick?
There is another behavior. Again, if you Google on YouTube, horse eating chick, it's even worse. The horse, there is the mother, how do you say in English? Mother
Hen?
chicken?
Hen, yeah.
Trying to protect the little chick and attacking the horse, and the horse going for the chicks and eating. No, I just use it for, obviously, no, they actually saw in nature. I've seen video of even deer eating birds. So our idea of the natural horsemanship has created this dichotomy that to justify violence, they created this dichotomy that you have to become a leader, because the horse is this poor prey animal that is anxious all the time, and if you don't give him leadership, they don't know how to survive. So I put it there as an intellectual question and say, is it that true, or is sometimes there is something that is not that straightforward? And horses are fine. They live, if you see them in nature, they're not that anxious animal that need a leader. They need a best friend. That's why Sarah, I like that she showed that video of the stallion. In reality, they didn't fight for 30 minutes to find who was the leader. They fought they investigate each other for 30 minutes to find the best friend. And once they found the best friend, that was it. They split in couple and they were happily ever after.
Excellent. Well, I want to start off with not one of my questions, but with one that we got from attendees. And I think it's a good one. And, you know, Sarah, you can start answering this, but we can throw it out to others as well. Because I know here in New Jersey, we got a cold snap this week. And I've been getting a lot of these questions in my email. But we were asked so they're experiencing a cold snap all over the country. This person particularly in Minnesota. With very cold nights. And Sarah, since you're in Michigan, I said, I'd throw it to you. What is your opinion of blanketing for just the week? And they've heard that blanketing, if they've grown a winter coat, is actually worse sometimes. So what, in your opinion, is the welfare thing to do with horses in the cold temperatures now?
So, it's funny. I think we were talking about this amongst ourselves before the panelists came on. So, Angelo was mentioning that he travels around the world, and even when I lived in Australia, if the temperature dropped to, I don't know, our equivalent of 40 degrees, their winter blankets went on, and the horses were so weighted down they can like barely move. I'm in northern Michigan. It was -10 when I woke up this morning. Some of mine have blankets and some do not. Some have been wearing blankets all winter. You know, I have Bernie, my poor off the track thoroughbred, who wears a heavyweight blanket pretty much all the time. I took it off him the other day so he could get some sun, and I will say that his hair is pretty matted down, but I also threw a blanket on an older broodmare that I have just for this week because it's so cold. So I think you need to know your horse. You know, the thing that, so first, the cold is not, for most horses, they're fine in the cold. I think you have trouble when they get wet and cold, like if you had freezing rain first. You have a horse with a poor immune system, like my older broodmare, or a young horse that, you know, is just looked kind of rough coming into the winter. So those are the animals that I worry about more. There is a lot of information out there about should you not blanket. So I think that Dr. Karen Waite at Michigan State made a flow chart, like, you know, does your horse need a blanket? Yes or no? And you go all the way down to if it needs a blanket at the bottom. So it's a very hot topic, I guess. And I would just say to do what you feel is right. I have one outside and I have some Arabians and they'll be shivering, you know, and so I bring them in and or put a blanket on them. You know, I think you just have to be cautious. I don't think that it would necessarily, you know, irreversibly damage him to wear a blanket for a week and mat his hair down. You know, I think it'll come back up when you take the blanket off and he'll probably be okay. So, you know, other things I think take precedence. So is the blanket physically hurting him, or is being out in the weather physically harming them? That's kind of where I would go with that decision, I think. Angelo is currently in a much warmer climate, so I don't know what he thinks about, well, moderately warmer, I guess, about blanketing.
No, yeah, you're perfectly right. I think that it's obviously Mother Nature. Horses evolved here in America, actually, on with cold weather on the cold prairie. So they evolved very, very well to trap heat, to resist for cold weather. I think they're fine. I've been in Sweden, and Sweden there it's very cold, and they actually don't even have shelter. What they have is the vertical wall that breaks the wind, and horses are out without blanket, and they don't put blanket, and they're fine. They're surviving fine. I think sometimes it's more like us as a person. We need to eventually sometimes put a blanket on the horse. And if we put the blanket, yes, we squeeze the hair down, but I think that the blanket compensate that one with the insulation that the blanket carry on itself, as long as we don't put a sheet. If we put a sheet, I think we are in trouble, because now we squish down the hair and we don't add extra like a thicker layer of insulation.
Very good.
Excellent.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sara, go ahead. Did you have more, or?
Well, I noticed a lot of people asked about stereotypes, and so there was a whole range of questions, and I think one of the overlying themes is, how do I make my horse better, right? So how do I cure him from doing his stereotype? And I'll say he, because, you know, my horse that has the worst stereotypes is a he. And so I think the important thing, you know, some people said, well, what do I do from after emancipation? Is that for some horses, this is never going away, right? This is like hardwired into them now. That's how they soothe themselves. And I would say we have some recent research saying that trying to make it go away is not in the horse's best interest. So, you know, I grew up showing horses, and in the era where you stopped them either because they were destroying your property. So, you know, my cribber breaks lots of little pieces of wood off, or because I thought it was bad for his health. And so you'd put cribbing collars on him, you'd try all sorts of options. Some of the more recent research is saying that, you know, that is his preferred behavior. That's what he really wants to do. That's how he calms himself down. And so if I force him to stop doing that, I'm actually making his mental health worse. And so I maybe we shouldn't be trying so much. Maybe instead we should work on them not developing stereotypes in the beginning, which generally happens during this like formative time period, and then maybe adjusting their environment to give them the best that we can and limit how destructive they are. So for example, my Horse doesn't crib very much at all when he's turned out 24/7 in a pasture with an electric fence. So what can he grab? So he will occasionally grab a bucket and try to crib, and he does some damage to the buckets. But for the most part, he seems much happier out 24/7, which was not his environment as a racehorse. If I go right now and put him in the stall, even to feed him dinner, he'll go right back to cribbing just like crazy. So I don't know. That's just, I don't know if Angelo has another thought on it, but
no, I totally agree with you. And it took a while for me. I was the master on creating the anti-cribbing with electric everywhere things, because I thought that the air would create colic. Instead, like you said, the newest study said that actually vice versa. They probably crib because they have the problem. And there's not that much air actually going on. It's just the air that moves through the larynx. So I start creating instead a stall where they can crib without destroying the stall, and they seems much happier. I want to also add one more thing. There are a couple of questions about riding bridleless or horses that are afraid of their shadow. That's a lot to solve. Like I can't, usually I do it either on a clinic or send me an email. You find my email somewhere.
I'll put it in the chat if you're
on my
okay
website.
with that.
On my website, there is the email. Send me an email and I respond there. But I want also only giving you this thought. There is I don't remember his name, but there is a great horseman of the past that used to say that that spooky horses does not exist. What exists are horses that do not respect the inside brain, because before spooking, they need to change bending and then drop the shoulder. The spook happens. So if I'm going straight, for example, and I'm flexing left, and there is something scary on the right, before spooking, he has to change bending, then he spooks. So if my flat work at home, I'm doing my homework well, and remember the pressure release that I was saying? If I apply my pressure to the left bending and I release when he's left bent only, that horse will know only that when I ask him to be left bent, he has to stay left bent. And that's how the gray horse that you see on the YouTube channel that I'm jumping bridleless was actually this. I had it for free because he wasn't jumping anymore anywhere because of spooking problem. And then recreating in a state of mind that the only answer is the one that I'm asking him, I was able to get him out bridleless. But there are also a lot of other exercises. One exercise is the trot ball that I showed you, but it's complicated to explain in a webinar like of 30 minutes. So feel free to send an email and I'll be happy to, don't do well typing, then maybe during the email, I'll share like a phone number and I'll do better like talking.
I did share your website so they can go onto your website and look. I have a question I found for Ellen, which is a good one because I know we have a couple therapists here, occupational therapists, and those with therapeutic riding facilities and handling facilities. So can you explain a little more on how horses can help humans recover from trauma or disability? Can you just elaborate on that a little bit more?
I can certainly try to. So I'd say we're still learning a lot about exactly how that those positive benefits are derived. But I would say absolutely, we do see benefits. Kind of the overwhelming majority of studies that have looked at various different participant populations, whether that's something like trauma or some other sort of background or disability, that these types of activities are helping those individuals. So there is something about being outside, being with a horse, that is good for the human. And so, yeah, go ahead, Angelo.
No. I was going to say, aren't we all nutcase? And that's why we approach the horses to fix ourselves. Just keep going.
So yeah, that is some of what my research will focus on, is actually what's occurring during those sessions. So some of it obviously depends on whether you're riding the horse. That obviously has some just physical benefits of the movement that comes along with that. But then also from the mental health side, there would be benefits too. So hopefully that answers the question.
Excellent, thank you. And this might, I just want to do maybe 2 more quick ones because I know we're kind of running out on time, and I know we're losing some people just because of time. But in referencing the stallion video where they're all doing the mouthing behavior, can either of you just briefly explain what that mouthing behavior is expressing?
Yeah, I think you see two different types of mouthing. So when I read that question, I was thinking of a baby mouthing, and a lot of people call that snapping. They snap their jaws, and I could have put a video in, and that is really to me is a submissive behavior. So you'll often see a fold. As a matter of fact, if you have never worked with young horses, you may have never seen it, but you'll often see a foal do it to another horse other than its mother, just quickly opening and closing their mouth. And to me, that says like, I'm a baby, don't hurt me. You know, that's kind of how I read that behavior. You'll even see like a young maiden mare do it to a stallion. Anybody that they see is much more dominant. In the stallion video, I think you're just seeing a stallion's kind of play fighting behavior where they're biting at each other's face and things like that. Which they would do, you know, if they were in a bachelor herd, they would practice their play fighting and things like that. So that's how I see that as quite different than what I would call snapping from a baby horse.
Yeah, I agree. And transfer that to human interaction. When they start doing that one to us, it's one of the most difficult behavior to stop because they do it. It's part of their nature, and that's how they express themselves with peers. So it's not that they're doing to try to bite us or to dominate us. It's part of their. It's like two dogs play fight, and then if they play fight with our hands, it becomes dangerous. But and so that's why we redirect to a young puppy to bite a toy rather than our hands, but we still redirect the behavior. We don't take it away because it's part of their nature. With the horses, it's kind of difficult to do that one, and so we need to pay attention. And there is one more question real quick that was about the if I have 3 horses.
Yeah,
that's actually.
And I'm going to pause right there because that's actually how I want to end, is about friendship, because we actually have a couple sort of friendship kind of questions. But I just want to mention quickly to everybody, I am putting a link in the chat. Oop, and that's actually not the link. That is your website. There is a link that I'm going to put in the chat now. That is for our evaluation for the program. We really want to know what everybody thought of all the speakers and the program and everything today, and then help us go forward with new talks and new speakers and new things. So please fill that out when you get a chance. But yeah, I would like to open up the questions to about friendship. And we had, you know, someone ask about they have 3 horses, and, you know, does a horse have a best friend? How does that work? But then also, can you force a friendship? Like, can you put 2 horses together and be like, you need to be friends because you're the only 2 you have? Can you guys, you know, address that at all, please?
Sarah, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I can just quickly say, I mean, I have a lot of horses, and you know, Angelo also is you know, helping with lots of horses at his university. I don't know, I think that they're like people. I mean, they have horses they do not like, and I see the same thing in dogs. So I'm currently staying with my parents, so we have a mixed household of dogs, and we have 5 unrelated dogs. And they have been in so many crazy fights that I never saw before. And why can't you just be friends, right? So I don't know. I don't think that you could force them. I would say if you're tied to having those 2 together, just make sure that they have space where they can get away from the other horse, and it's not really dragging down their condition, for example. I do think it would be stressful to be constantly chased or harassed by another horse. In general, they do that and then they stop, right? So they've established that dominancy. But I've got 2 right now that are really harassing each other. So I don't know, maybe Angelo can tie them together and force them to be friends.
No, yeah, that's I think that she was saying mentioned 3, and I actually had my 3 horses. The more dominant was best friend with the 3rd one, the less dominant, and the one in the middle was harassing constantly the 3rd one. But then the 3rd one was finding protection on the first one, hiding behind the first one, which was strange. But even they've done a lot of studies even on the they call loose stall or paradise paddock in Sweden. It's big, keeping the horses all into a big area, and that actually comes out that like Sarah said, there are like someone that hate each other, and actually sometimes it doesn't show up the first 15 days because they're still like investigating each other, and then you are thinking, oh, perfect, everything is perfect, everything is fine, and then you had major accident because they decided. So I think personally that because of their innate instinct of finding a best friend and needing someone, if you have two horses, you can kind of force friend them, but as soon as you put in a third one, and they don't, and the two of them don't necessarily like each other, they're going to find a friend on another one, and then start cornering the third one. So I would say two horses, you can kind of get away and force friend them. But as soon as you go to a bigger number, you have to make sure that they like each other. And like I said, do not be happy if the first 15 days everything looks ideal. Keep an eye even longer. And at that point, you either create enough space that they can separate, like you saw those stallions. That was a huge area. So the group can separate each other and everything is fine. But if you don't have that luxury of having enough space, I would monitor them and remove the horse that is not friend. And then also there was a question, can I be friend with me riding? Can I be the friend when we ride at one point? I think that their interspecies friendship exists. There are some awesome video on YouTube of dogs play with the horses, and also another strange animal that I don't remember that was playing with the horse. But I think, so there is that one. But I think that mostly is that because we take away with the stall, walking and exercise, the fact that we become the exercise companion, it's a huge thing for them. And I know the horses likes that fact, and then they want to do that exercise. Now, pushing that one to become a friend, like I said, only the dog evolutionary has evolved emotional interaction with horses, with the human. All the other species has just become a domestic animal and not an emotional animal. So that's a little bit forcing it.
I just wanted to mention one more thing about that. I think that a lot of our idea about horses' social interaction is that we view them like we were traditionally taught to view dogs, that there's like this one that's dominant and then this one that's the beta and down the row. And horses' social structure is both fluid and also not that well arranged. So like one horse may be dominant when you're feeding, but he doesn't make any of the other decisions. So, usually a mare, an older mare, is the one who decides where they're going, when they're going for water, which pasture they're going to, but still might defer to that other horse if something new happens, or I don't know, or they're being fed. And so I think it is more difficult for us to understand. The only thing I'd caution against, is the situation that I have right now. So I have 6 in a pen together. And some that weren't there until probably about 60 days ago. So waiting, like Angelo said, does make sense. And now I have a 3-year-old mare who's really harassing my older gelding Triffy that Dr. Williams will remember. And I've been just kind of watching them from the window. They have plenty of space to get away, but she won't let him go stand with the other horses. She's always driving him out into the field by himself. And I thought, well, this is like terrible. They're being horrible to him. And I actually think that, I could start noticing problems, like he gets rain rot or he starts to lose weight because he's living with like some constant stress from this 3-year-old. So I will eventually separate them so that she isn't bothering him so much. But that's a horse that was not dominant. It was a young horse that was pretty submissive to the older horses that now is kind of asserting its dominance.
I want to add one more thing, since you mentioned the wolves. Actually, now the latest studies have found out that even the pack of wolves, there's no leadership. There's no alpha, beta, and everything. They actually found out that it's a family group. It's mother, father, and a bunch of sons, cousins, etc. So all our theory like that, only the alpha couple would reproduce because the pack can support only 1 litter a year, and the alpha couple will manage to keep all the other under control so they don't reproduce. In reality, it's all wrong, and they don't reproduce because Mother Nature has put the very strict rule against not interbreeding. So as long as they're related, like even in horses, as long as they are related, the father, Sue McDonald has the group of ponies and there are like 100 ponies they've been there for how many, 20 years? And she hasn't introduced new blood. She genetically tested them, and there's no interbreeding. They're all distance genetic, which means that there is a mechanism that prevent inbreeding in nature. And same thing with the pack of wolves. It's just that they're all genetically related because they're all sons and daughter, and it's a mother and father sometimes reprimanding the kids because they're like too loud or too something. So even in wolves and gorillas, the silverback, the whole theory of the leadership has been destroyed. It's a familiar group for them, where the familiar rules stand.
Great. Thank you so much, Angelo and Sara, for answering that question. I know we had a lot of questions on that topic of friends and groups of horses. We're going to have one last question here. I know that people are signing off as we come to an end here. I just want to remind thank everyone for participating in this installment of our horse management series webinar. Next week, we have one last installment. We are going to be focusing on equine nutrition, and we have Dr. Bert Stanier from Penn State University and Dr. Krishona Martinson, who are going to be joining us for presentations next week. I am going to put a link back to the registration in the chat in case you have not signed up yet. You still can. And then I'm going to put one last question to our panelists. How can you help a horse that has a lot of anxiety when they are ridden outside, but are only mildly anxious when they are ridden in an indoor arena?
I'll jump into this one. Mostly it has to deal with, like I said, with the aids. When we're outside of the arena, there are more stimuli, there are more changing. So the horse keeps it's programmed to react to new novel stimuli to survive. But also Mother Nature has made another mechanism which he has to adapt very quickly, because if he doesn't adapt, he's going to die because he doesn't have time to eat. So we can work on this two natural instinct by becoming very, very strong with our aids. I normally would do, if we were doing interacting things, I would have made you do a game of squeezing. You can try, squeeze the arm of your friend, and then when you squeeze, the person says the alphabet, and when you release, it's complicated, but we don't have time. But in other words, aids, if you learn to be elastic when you apply your aids, the horse will be tense and will ask for you what behavior he needs to do, and then you can keep asking, lowering of the head, which is the horse goes into an eating position where more blood goes to the brain. So mentally, the horse keeps staying in a more relaxed state of mind. Again, to be anxious, and when you go outside, 99% the horse is raising his head, reversing the neck, and putting himself into an alert position. From the alert position, all his mental state is going to be fight or flight. If with the aids, we train him to lower the head and stretch him down towards an eating position, when you're outside and he's into that state of mind, you keep asking the horse to perform that task, and it will learn to be more within a certain reasonable like spectrum, but it will learn to relax and cooperate more.
And the only thing I'll add is I think that a lot of times it is us, right? So, you know, I have had a lot of horses, and I have noticed that sometimes they do similar bad things, and I'm like, well, I'm the only common denominator, right? So it's something about me. So if I take my horse to a horse show and the weather is really bad and I think, oh, he's going to behave terribly, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So I think sometimes it's more of a human head game. And there are a lot of people who focus on the human aspect of it to try to help that animal to relax. I mean, I really do think they look to you. You know, they might not need a leader all the time, but in that scenario where you take them to a scary situation, I think they are kind of looking at you to set the pace and to tell them that, you know, that response is acceptable. And so I think that head game is part of it as well.
Excellent. I think that's a wonderful place to end. I would like everybody who's remaining on to give all of our panelists a virtual round of applause. You know, raise your hand, whatever you want to do, shout at the screen. But I think it was great. I even learned a lot today. So thank you very much. And like Jen mentioned, please go ahead, register for next week if you haven't already. That is our last one of the webinar in the Horse Management Seminar webinar series. Take our evaluation from today so we know all your feedback and what you liked and what you want to hear in the future. So thank you again, everybody. Have a good night.